Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Picks Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary. Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. I hope you enjoyed Wednesday's episode as much as I did as we discussed connecting with your partner and having deep conversations together, all having so much fun. It was awesome. And this week we have another amazing couple. As I promised you, we're getting more of them. Jachym, Jerie, and Natasha, who I'm not sure I'm pronouncing their names correctly. I'm so bad with names. They've created the exceptional relationship formula, and I'm really curious to hear about it. But before we get into it, you want to start by telling us a bit about yourself?
I'm Jachym, and I'm here with my beautiful wife, Natasha. And together we run a business called yourexceptionalrelationship.com, where we help couples create relationships that are deeply fulfilling and satisfying and help them be back on track with their intimacy and their connection.
Yep. And I'm Natasha, his better half, and we live, we travel together. We have a full-time gig going on.
Such fun. Sounds like you guys have an amazing relationship. Was your relationship always like that?
Absolutely not. It started off quite great.
Yeah. All the way from the beginning. What was it like?
Well, you want to start from the beginning?
Mm-hmm. So we have a very special start, or the beginning of our relationship. We actually met at the London Heathrow Airport. I was flying from Canada, trying to get to France. Jachym was flying from the US, trying to get home to Switzerland for Christmas. We literally crossed paths. There was a tiny bit of snow and everything shut down. Nothing was flying. There were mountains, literal mountains of luggages, because everything just kept pouring in. And eventually I found myself at the airport outside in the arrivals area. And then I found a seat because I had to wait to get out of there. There was nothing to do but to wait for your next flight out. So I sat down, and the stranger next to me was actually Jachym. And that's how we met. And we ended up staying 3 full days in London together. It's my first time in Europe, so this was actually quite exciting for me. But in this stressful situation, we actually got to see quite a bit of the person behind how we deal with stress, how we deal with this kind of chaos. So we kept in touch from there. That turned into 2 to 3 years worth of long distance relationship, which was really hard and made us learn to actually communicate and build trust. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. And then later on, I also moved to Switzerland, and we moved in together. And our relationship took all forms, like long distance, and we explored all types of things. But it was really when the honeymoon phase stopped, because, you can imagine if we're always apart and it was a long distance relationship, whenever we saw each other, there was excitement, there was just attraction and love, and there's so much to share. But when we moved in together, of course, then you have the difference in lifestyle, and then there are real problems you have to work through, and there are then patterns you bring into the home. So that's when things start to become more messy, and that was what we had to work through.
That sounds crazy. You're stuck in the airport for 3 days just because of little snow. I guess it's expected in England. But what did you see in each other in this situation? There's a lot of stress going on. Did you see the good or the bad in each other? You want to elaborate a bit on that?
First of all, we were complete opposites. Back then, I was quite negative. I didn't have a good worldview. I thought the world was screwed up, and I was quite unhappy, actually. And Natasha was complete opposite. She was actually really positive. She was trying to save the world, and, everything is kind of rainbows and unicorns. And so that there was quite a big difference. I didn't expect that I'm going to marry this woman whatsoever. I was doing martial arts back then. I was committed for another 7 years. So I was in a retreat center, and I wasn't looking for a relationship. But somehow, we were good company, and we had those games that we were playing. So we were stuck at the airport the first night, and cold stone floor, you can't sleep properly. So we were entertaining each other, and it was just quite an effortless connection, I would say.
I think everyone around us within the airport were extremely stressed. And yet, for the two of us, there was this acceptance of it's what it is. So let's wait it out. And of course, flights would get rescheduled, and then he would go to the airport, get canceled, and come back. And there were just so many things. And it's interesting because in the moment, you don't really know what's going on. One thing that really stands out is that although we were complete strangers, I didn't know him that well. We were waiting in line. People were being very kind to one another. People would be like, "Oh, where are you trying to go? Do you need to call anybody? And when we would answer, because, we were kind of together, as in if he went to the bathroom, I would take care of his stuff and vice versa. So this kind of, yes, strangers, but mutual trust built quite quickly because it is a special circumstance, that's for sure. So that already started to happen at the beginning. But when people ask us, oh, where are you headed? What do you need? And we gave completely different answers because we came from different places and we're going to different locations, we could see that people were confused. When they reacted that way, I was confused too. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Why would you assume I'm with this guy? I just met him a day ago, So I would react also like, oh hell, I don't know him. But I think they also already saw that we were connecting. We didn't know, and that we were, helping each other out and supporting each other in that way. So there's lots to unpack, once you think about it. But it was definitely not love at first sight. It was a stressful time, but it was something definitely that we grew from, and we actually grew a lot differently into the people we are today from that moment in time.
Yeah, like most people, they meet someone, they have a nice time, they go on a date, and here instead you're taking care of each other and building the trust right from the beginning. It's a really interesting point to start off from and build off. Okay, after that, you're stuck in a long distance relationship. What advice would you give to someone who's currently in a long distance relationship?
For me, it only worked because not only did we talk a lot, but we worked out anything that was bothering us. And that wasn't easy at all because like Jachym described, I was this little fluffy bunny that would jump around and kind of make everyone happy and wanted the world to be happier, that kind of thing. So that was the persona I was trying to be in the world back then. But I wasn't very connected to myself, my emotions, and I really had a hard time actually communicating what it is that I need or want. So Jachym had to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of pushing me, really asking me if something is wrong, really asking what's going on so that we could work through even the smallest misunderstandings and miscommunication. He was really thorough, even though you weren't a coach back then,
Right.
but he was really thorough in making sure that we were on the same page. We weren't just sweeping things under the carpet.
Right. And the other thing is that I don't believe that a long distance relationship who doesn't have some kind of endpoint in terms of ending the long distance is a viable option. For some people, it might be because that's, that they're happy with that and that's okay. For a lot of people, it isn't. And that was the same for us, that it was clear at some point where it was like, okay, we got to make some kind of plan. Like they can't just keep being in the open and, 10 years later, I mean, Natasha had this image of us being on Skype, 80 years old and gray hair. And she was like, this just can't go on. And I was like, okay, well, let's make plans. And so that's how we decided, okay, she's going to come to Switzerland. So she started learning German. And I do recommend that, like, if you don't have an intention of actually making it into something more, I would see it as something more difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's continue on in your story. Natasha moves to Switzerland and all of a sudden different things start happening. The honeymoon phase is over. How did you deal with all the challenges?
So what you have to know as well is that we did experiment with all kinds of relationship forms as well. So we had, for example, an open relationship during the long distance and also after long distance, after we got married. So we went through open relationship, polyamorous relationship, and this kind of stuff. So that was a challenge in and of itself. But how we dealt with the challenges, or how we came eventually to a flipping point, like where we actually did do something different, is actually getting help, where we realized it was not quite working the way we thought it would work out. Because when those challenges come, yes, you can communicate, and communication is still an important aspect, but often there's behavioral patterns within the relationship that are happening that you're blind to. Okay, you don't see the game you're both playing because you're playing it, right? And so having someone, a third party, point some things out can be like, oh, right, I am doing that. I am blaming her or whatever it is that the behavior is in that moment. And those things are not as pretty to look at, but it's absolutely necessary in order to move through that stage. Otherwise, you are going to get stuck in that stage and you're not going to create a relationship that is deeply fulfilling because you are driven by those unconscious patterns and they just keep playing out over and over and over again. And either, the relationship breaks, it stagnates, or you start living separate lives next to each other.
Yeah, so then how did it work? Like you went for help and all of a sudden problems were solved? What was the process of it?
We were getting more and more aware of the patterns that were popping up before we saw. Jachym has had years of coaching,
Right.
one-on-one with different teachers. And we went through really many iterations of this pivoting from what we knew to be something that was hurtful, either towards ourselves or, to our partner, and pivoting to something again and again towards a better direction. So maybe at the beginning, it was just something as simple as noticing how I was talking to Jachym was just not nice. And it's kind of sad, but it took some years for us to get to the point to realize that, wait a second, me nagging at you all the time about the same things, or me complaining that you can never do things as well as I want you to, or you're not following the exact instructions I'm giving you, or I was actually bringing him down on a regular basis, because I used to be way more of a control freak, way more of a mothering type. And the more we kind of went into this spiral, we would go into a conflict pattern where he was trying to do the right thing so that I would be emotionally okay. I wouldn't be irritated. I wouldn't be annoyed. I wouldn't be angry at him. But then at the same time, I saw that he was doing stuff trying to please me, but then that's not what I want. I just want him to do things right. And then he would be very unhappy with himself because he was pushing back his boundaries, just to make things work. So it took a long time for that to build up in our relationship. As in, first, it was just a comment here and there, and we thought, oh, it's just normal, it's nothing, old couples bicker, it's almost like a definition of long-term couples, they nag at each other from time to time. But over time, we realized, wow, we opened up our emotions actually to one another, and he started talking to me about how hurtful it was, what I was actually doing to him, the impact we were having on one another. Even though it might be socially accepted, it was hurtful. It tore us further apart. It disconnected us. We started to do things that we didn't even want to. We started to upkeep a relationship around each other's insecurities, around walking on eggshells so that person doesn't get triggered, so that person doesn't have an emotional response. Let me just do the right thing all the time, and then this relationship will work. So we tried to do that for enough of a period of time to realize this is so exhausting. We still, get stuck on the same issues, and they're not even massive issues. We're not talking about family planning or finances. We're talking about everyday stuff that is starting to become an issue. It's starting to become emotional, even household stuff. So then we realized, okay, definitely something is going on. And step by step, we became more mindful, conscious of what was really happening. And then over time, we worked with different people, and we solved it kind of piece by piece until we actually found out, okay, this is what a relationship can be. And that's how we found, in a way, our own way of navigating relationships and understanding relationships, how they work and how they can be really, really great.
Yeah, I think that's great because it's such a classic example of how couples break up from all those little things. Like you said, it's so normal and acceptable for couples to nag and just fight, but those are the little things that could eventually blow up and become something so much bigger. Once you had your great relationship, at what point did you decide to go and work in relationships?
Well, so we both have been coaches before, and we have worked with all kinds of people. I actually used to do hypnosis, and already then I was working with relationship issues, getting over a breakup, finding someone, and those kind of things. Or actually, there was a guy who came to see me, who was thinking about breaking up with this woman, and later he sent me a picture of a baby that they have now, and so that was one piece of work I did with them. So it was always we worked in all kinds of areas with people. It's just that once we really embodied what a relationship can be and how fantastic it can be, once you pass through this more difficult stage that a lot of couples do pass through, it becomes just better. It becomes better than the honeymoon. And we were we want to let people know that this is possible. You don't have to settle for something where you are not 100% fulfilled. You really don't. And you don't have to accept what's so-called normal, where there is bickering and nagging and well, that's just how it is, No, it's not. It really isn't. And that is where we are passionate about, because we know that if you do shift within yourself, when you shift the relationship, you're going to impact the world, because the way you're showing up in the world is going to change. Because you're waking up, you're feeling grateful, you're feeling empowered, you're feeling good about yourself. The way you're going to interact with your colleague is going to be completely different than when you're waking up and you're dreading with whom you're next to, And then if you bring kids up in this environment, whatever, that has an impact on them as well, because a lot of our relating comes from our parents. So this is this massive thing, and that we're really passionate about because it can have such a big impact on all levels, from the micro to the macro.
It's the same reason why I'm really passionate about relationships. I really believe that if you have a fantastic relationship, it changes everything else in your life, just like you said. So for those people who are listening and think, okay, every relationship has some nagging and bickering, we want to describe to them what a relationship could look like.
So you can look at relationship as like a field of energy, right? And so you have the bickering kind of energy, which is a darker, or we'd say negative energy. Blaming is also. And then you have a love energy where you feel empowered, you feel great. And so it is a clear discernment between those two. Either you're going through the fears where the blame and the bickering, all of that comes in, or you're going through the love. And so what that means, practically speaking, for us, it literally means I'm waking up and I'm feeling like I'm the luckiest man alive to have a woman like her in my life. I'm not making this up. I literally wake up feeling that way. And it means that we are empowering each other. The bickering, the nagging is disempowering. You're disempowering your partner. When you are in the love, when you are respecting each other, when you're nurturing each other, and when you're being of service towards each other rather than trying to get something from your partner, you're lifting each other up. That love energy gets stronger. And that is tangible. It's something that you can feel within your body. And you know that. You know it when you're in the honeymoon phase, there is something like that. But it can just be a lot better than that. But so you know it, but it's just that awareness, like you can have that and you can grow through that because you're going to let go of your own back. It's not your partner's fault. You also need to let go of your own stuff because how you show up in the relationship shapes the relationship.
And another way I would describe the difference between something that feels routine, like a routine romantic relationship that people have, I see that as a functioning household unit most of the time, right? So people come home, they maybe make dinner or order in, they share a meal, then they watch Netflix and maybe talk a little bit about work, but pretty much the answers from the day before or the 2 days ago is still the same thing about work. And then they watch a movie with the same plot because it's all Hollywood. And then they go to bed and then, they don't see each other that much. And maybe they do something on the weekend or maybe not. Maybe they're just doing more chores on the weekend, or maybe they do one thing new or they squeeze in one date night, but then it feels the same. It feels like the same routine. And then you're meal prepping and it's just everyone is here working together to manage life in a way, and we feel like, wait a second. Especially if you feel like you found the one, the person who you want to spend your life with, the one who you really want to commit to. Why do you want to come together to manage households? Yes, you need to, it's practical stuff, but is that why you're together? So you can be more efficient when you meal prep? So you can, watch Netflix on the couch together? Like, what is it that you want to have and live and share in this life, right? And I think that's a really valid question because when we ask, lots of couples that we speak to and work with, no one really knows what they actually want to envision for their marriage. When we ask, why did you get together? Well, think to the moment where you got married. Like, why did you do that? Why did you commit to one another? And usually the answer is because it was such a great match. And we thought from then on, it would just be great. But great for what? What is it? What is it that you want to share? So here we're really talking about, okay, you can create an incredible relationship, but that actually means that you bring out the best in one another. You can surrender, you can share your fears, you can be supported by someone else, you can let the help in, or you can dream big together. For example, right now we're traveling everywhere, right? That was Jachym's idea. That was not my idea. It took a little bit of time to get on board, but it was his hunch. So I was like, what is it that you feel pulled to do? Let me tune into that too. Let me, feel into that too. And I trusted him. I trusted his inspiration and his hunch. And now we get the opportunity to go everywhere and be everywhere and meet different people and have different experiences. So depending on how much goodness you want to bring into your life, you can literally create that with your partner. And when you build something that is really sacred, loving, respectful, and harmonious, and you stop wasting, and I really mean wasting time arguing about the same things, bickering about a crumb on the floor or where the towel was hung. If you stop spending time and energy on that stuff, you can pull together and create something amazing that if you were, on your own, you wouldn't be able to do. So you found one another and you can do incredible things as one unit. That's the starting point. That's just the starting point.
Yeah, I really think that people should sit down and visualize vividly, write down in detail exactly what you want your relationship to look like, how you should feel, what happens when challenges come up, either within your relationship or in your own life. How are you spending time together? Every aspect of it, so that way you can make it real and actually get to it. Now, I know you created the exceptional relationship formula. You want to tell us what that is?
So through our own struggle and our own difficulty, and having gone through our transformation ourselves, we have come up with the exceptional relationship formula to help people in their own relationships, because there is a clear way that you can shift your relationship. It doesn't matter if you are in a negative space, if you are having difficulty, that's okay. That's actually good, because it leads to the first step of the exceptional relationship formula, which is to pivot. So you got to notice, okay, well, we're going into a direction that is not going to be very helpful for us. It's going to lead in a scenario that we don't want, which I described before, the living the separate lives, or cheating is going to happen, or whatever else is going to happen, right? So that is the first thing you want to pivot, right? And once you know you want to pivot, it's like, well, great, where do I pivot to? What are we talking about? And that is when the dreaming comes in, right? Which you would describe. So you want to dream up what is the ideal relationship you want to have. Now, the important part with this is not to think about it, but feel it. You really want to feel it. You want to have it that there's a feeling of aliveness in it. It inspires you. It drives you. You're like, hell yes, this is the feeling you want to have. It's like, yes, it's a whole body yes. It's not just like, yeah, that's nice.
They live it. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to feel that pull, and it's not as much in the circumstance, but in the energy, really connecting to that energy, being together, right? So that's the second step. The third step is to trust. Okay, you are in a difficult place, and there is challenges, and it can be difficult at the beginning to shift the relationship. So you got to believe and trust that you actually can do it, that you actually can create a relationship of your dream. So that's a really important step. And the last one is to create, right? So you want to create the relationship. What does that mean? Okay, we have the dream, we have the vision, we're committing to that. We are 100% committed to this outcome. What is it that we need to adjust? Where do we need to clear things out? So for example, if I have a behavior that's disempowering Natasha in some way, for example, she used to come to me while I was busy, and I'd be like, I'm busy, like leave me alone. And I would do this in a way that wasn't nice for Natasha. That behavior has to go. We have to address that behavior. Has no space in the relationship. When Natasha's trying to control me and she's bickering and she's nagging, that has no space in the relationship, because that is not in alignment with the vision that you have for the relationship. It's not that you should suppress them. That is absolutely not the way to go. That absolutely will backfire. It is about taking a stance against it. When it does arise, you address it ASAP, as soon as possible. You don't want to wait. You want to literally weed those things out and be together in it. So you're together. You're not saying, oh, well, Natasha, you're having this bad behavior. Oh, this is so bad. You need, like, you're stopping us from reaching our dream relationship. No, that's not what's going to happen. We're together in it, because Natasha's patterns, she has learned from her family, from her upbringing, how she has gone through life, and I've done the same thing. So it's not that there's anyone to blame. You're together in it, and there's certain issues that come up that need to be addressed as a team. So what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about this bickering and this nagging? Like, how are we actually going to address this together? So those are the 4 important steps in the exceptional relationship formula.
Well, I love that. Now, you just said that if something comes up, right, like you gave the example of Natasha's coming while you're working and you push her away, do you deal with it at that second, during that time, or later on?
It depends. It depends how the emotions are. So if it's something that the emotions are very high, I don't recommend dealing with it right in this moment, because it's just most likely going to escalate into further conflict. So when I mean as soon as possible, I mean as soon as possible as you're actually in a state to look at it, rather than being lived by it. Okay, you're getting possessed by your patterns. You're not having your patterns. The patterns is having you. Okay, in this moment. And so when you notice, okay, so we had a little conflict, we're going our separate ways, whatever, and we're reflecting, we're feeling into it, then you're like, okay, let's come back together, let's discuss this, let's see what has happened. And that means me sharing what I've seen, her sharing what she has seen, and seeing how we can come together. Okay, it's not about compromising, because that's a huge mistake people make. It's to compromise everything, and in the end they're roommates, because there's no polarity within the relationship. There's no difference, no uniqueness anymore, because I'm just trying to be okay and be pleasing to her, and she's trying to be pleasing to me. Well, that's not it. You want to be this unit where there's the difference from me and the difference from her, and together we transcend and include both of those, which creates an amazing energy that's exponential.
Mm-hmm. And if, for example, because it can happen that you yourself are not aware of something, I don't know, say mean or like a side jab, something passive aggressive that I did, for example, what Jachym and I have done for a while now is to have weekly meetings to check in, because it's like, what's the point of pivot, dream, trust, create if you're going to forget about it? It's not a New Year's resolution. This is something that you're going to share your life together and live. So it's not something to forget. So that's why for us, it's important that we establish this weekly, we call it a meeting, but that sounds way more formal than what it really is. We literally just sit down on the couch and be like, okay, let's talk. And no matter how busy of a week, we still make time for it, because sometimes it can be literally like 5 minutes. If the week went really well, we just kind of celebrate. We're on this ride together. We're doing so great and there's more love than before. Or sometimes it's like 45 minutes because maybe he'll mention something. He'll be like, well, actually this week I noticed that, you said a few things when you were making dinner, or, oh, I noticed that when you responded to me, it felt like this energy, like how you used to, react when you would get really irritated at me and treat me this way, or whatever it might have been. So we give each other feedback, because we ourselves might have missed it, be completely unaware or forgotten how you reacted, what you even said or did, and that happens. So that's why in this weekly meeting, both our experiences, our emotions are valid and respected, and they're shared in this safe space. And we're able to give this feedback, not because we're trying to become the perfectly, like conflict-free couple, because that's not normal or human either. We're just bringing up stuff that has touched us either in a really positive way or in a negative way. We're sensitive people. I think everyone is a sensitive person, and sometimes you go through your day and you say, oh, that felt a bit not so nice, and you're like, oh, no big deal, it was justified how they reacted. But if it hurt you, or if something didn't feel quite right, it felt off, then you can bring it up. It's completely valid. And those are actually alarm signals throughout the day and throughout the week that notifies you, hey, there's something going on that is not aligned to love, that isn't for the growth of you being together. So that's when we actually have an open conversation, and we're there to listen, we're there to learn. We're not there to blame, we're not there to be the best spiritual people either. We're just there to be like, hey, I experienced this week. Well, what happened there for you? Like, what were you thinking? What was going on? Like, were you really frustrated because you actually needed my help, but I was busy doing something else? Sometimes it's just a misunderstanding, but that is where further conflicts or misunderstandings can be addressed if we miss it at that moment, as Jachym has said.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because it creates a safe space to express yourself, to connect with the other person, and to really, really understand the other person, to see why they're behaving this way and what's going on for them, because usually there's a reason there. Maybe it's just a pattern that they grew up with. Maybe it's because of something happened in their childhood, but having this calm, safe place to talk about it helps you get to understand the other person and work something out for the future. Now, let's go back to the first step. The first step is desire. And if someone doesn't have that desire, then they can't do the rest of it. So do you ever have a couple that one partner wants to and the other person just doesn't have that desire? What do you do then?
Right. Yeah, that can happen, that someone is in that. And if that's the case, you lead. You lead with what you see. Someone is going to take more of the work, for example. So, for example, in our relationship, I tend to be more mindful of the relationship and of where I want to bring the relationship. And in the beginning, I thought, well, this is not fair. Natasha should, be more like me or whatever. And that's complete BS. It's really not true. Because what am I expecting? I'm expecting Natasha to be like me. Well, then I have a relationship with myself. That's not the point. That's really not the point of having a relationship, And so it's okay if you have a vision in mind and you want to bring it towards this, you can still implement things. And what will happen when you stand your truth, when you speak your truth, when you are living your truth, one of two things will happen. The other partner will come on board, or you start living yourself, you start to outgrow each other, and where it comes to a point where it's like, this just is not going to happen because we are not aligned with where we want to have a relationship. And there's nothing wrong. Like, we think as, for example, divorce or breakup as something bad. It's not bad, because you had your learnings, you had your time together, you grew together, and there's a a time where things come to an end and it's time to move on, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean you have failed. You have discovered your truth, and you will attract the person who will be willing to live that kind of truth with you. We make the mistake thinking, well, if it's not going to work out, I'll be lost and whatever. No, actually, you won't be lost, because you'll be sending out this kind of energy that people pick up on, the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, that is aligned to what you want to have in your life. But it starts with you. And there's a great chance that your partner will come on board, because what you are suggesting is actually something very, very beautiful. It's not something harmful. It can be scary. It can be intimidating at times. There's no room for baggage in this. It really isn't. And we're taking a very hard stance against it. And a lot of counselors and whatever don't necessarily agree with that. We don't want to make things just so you kind of work together and work around each other's insecurity. We don't stand for that, because your personal growth, you yourself are not really happy with this kind of behavior in the first place. So it's a very clear no to us. You want to address everything, and you don't want to carry that stuff.
And one thing for sure, even if one person gets help or sees the relationship differently, or they begin to even resolve certain issues on their own, maybe not everything, of course, but like when they start to see things differently, okay, so maybe how they react would change. So for example, maybe it's less emotionally charged how I approach Jachym with certain topics that we used to struggle with. Now, every time one person shifts in how they think, in their mindset, or in their behavior, something has changed, right? So once one change happens within the relationship, your partner, even though they didn't see a coach, they didn't read a book, they didn't do anything differently, they are now faced with a different reaction from you. That means that they are given an opportunity like never before to choose what they're going to do this time. So you're not inviting them into the same pattern, which might have been dysfunctional and not worked that well at all. But now you've given them a new opportunity just to invite them. Hey, this is what I'm going to say now. It's nicer. Or this is how I'm going to react now. There's less blaming. I'm not as emotional. I'm not saying something back to you irritated or annoyed. Wow. At first, it might be a little shock, might be a bit of confusion, but most of all, there's going to be an opportunity for your partner to then choose, when maybe back in the day, it didn't seem like there was any option. It was just, okay, here we go. This is the argument time. Or, oh, here we go. This is the game we play. No. There's an opportunity now, because one person has made a change, and that change gives an opportunity for that partner to re-engage in a different way.
Yeah, it really breaks the pattern and allows things to play differently. Like you said, there might be shock or confusion. They might also in the beginning be angry or respond in a negative way. And you have to realize that you're the one that changed, and you're the one that's doing things differently, and applaud yourself for it. It's great, but don't get angry at them for being angry, because all of a sudden there's a different game and they don't know how to play it. Now,
how does it work? You do it once and then you have an exceptional relationship?
Well, so with the exceptional relationship formula, it's actually circular. So you go pivot, dream, trust, create, and guess what? You'll pivot again, because you realize, what we envisioned, that wasn't actually quite right. So you adjust on the way. We don't want to give you the idea that you set one goal and that's it. You go and you realize, that's not quite right. Let's see how we can do this differently. And so it's actually an iteration. You go through iterations where you feel more and more at peace with how you are in the relationship. And, what you mentioned before is a perfect example, so you are shifting and the person is getting angry because you're not playing this dysfunctional dance anymore. And part of that dysfunctional dance was a payoff. There's a payoff in some kind of way emotionally. They're often is actually you're shortchanging yourself. Basically, you get a payoff, but it's not really the real deal. So you get some kind of kick out of it or something in some way, but it's not really the right thing. But so when someone shifts, they can be feeling of, oh my God, they're abandoning me or something like that. They're leaving me alone. They're not loving me anymore, even though they actually are loving it, just in a very different way now. And so when they are reacting, again, that is your practice. Right? When someone is reacting, that is your practice. So they are angry. How are you going to respond to that? Not how are you going to react to that, because the reaction is usually a reactive, an impulse. How are you going to respond to it? And if a reaction happens, that's fine. You come back afterwards, you reflect on it, see, okay, how can I handle this differently? How can I be differently with this? And so that's why it's so beautiful with the exceptional relationship formula, is that you can do it as a couple and you can do it by yourself, because it comes back to yourself. You are engaging with your partner and you have the power to create from your space. Okay. And many people don't see this. They think, it's my partner. They have to change. It's their fault. And so what they're doing is they're completely disempowering themselves. It's like, you have all the power. My wife or my husband, they have all the power. I'm like this helpless thing, and I'm just waiting and telling them, you gotta change. hold on a second, this is not quite true. You have power. You actually are part responsible for this dynamic. This is the ownership, and also when you create, you are recognizing your creative power. It sounds like a small thing, but it's huge. People don't know that they're creators. They really don't know. We think we don't because we think it has to do with drawing or whatever, and it has not. You're creating your life. With every decision you've taken in your life, you have created something. You created your job, you created your relationship, you created how your family respond, you created everything. So come back and own it, and then do something about it and create something that you love.
Yep. We are creators. So anyone who wants to create an exceptional relationship together with Jachym and Natasha should go right now to yourexceptionalrelationship.com. Links will be in the show notes, and make your relationship exceptional. Well, thank you so much, Jachym and Natasha. It was awesome speaking to you. Did you enjoy that episode? Could you do me a personal favor and subscribe and leave a review? It would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much, and have an awesome day.